Hello, and welcome to part two of our roadmap session webinars. This session is going to focus on the digital roadmap and how you can create a digital roadmap that delivers on your corporate strategy. If you haven't done so already, I recommend watching the discovery webinar before this one, as that actually goes into how we get those problems and solutions that go into the roadmap. So it probably will make a little bit more sense if you watch that one first. To go on to the intro and what we're hoping to learn, I'm asking for 20 minutes of your time, and we're going to break down strategy and why a digital roadmap will help you hit your business goals, the common pitfalls and how to avoid them, how a digital roadmap will deliver corporate strategy successfully. We're going to go for a brief recap of the discovery process as covered before, and then how a digital roadmap links with effective discovery sessions. So that's what we're going to go through. If you haven't watched the first session, my name is Sean. I'm the strategy lead here at Distinction, and my job is facilitating all of our discoveries, roadmaps, and working with clients to ensure that they're getting the answers they need, as well as we're creating sessions that are engaging and clients enjoy doing. So hopefully off this, you will get a bit more information about how you could apply a roadmap, and hopefully some of this may be quite relevant to you in the sense that we cover a lot of stuff that marketing managers may be facing at the moment. But anyway, without further ado, let's get to it. So 80% of leaders feel their company is good at crafting strategy, but only 44% feel they are good at the implementation. And I think this is probably where the major parts of a lot of strategies fall down, is that people are good at sort of saying what we need to do, but then when it actually gets to doing it, there's a lot of problems. And if we just go to the next slide, you can see here, so I've broken this down by corporate, business, and functional strategy. The corporate strategy includes the vision, mission, values, and focus areas, as well as the overall strategy. So turnaround is a fairly big one. Stability and expansion. Now, expansion is probably the one we deal with the most. Companies wanting to grow, wanting to do better. We've seen a lot of layoffs at the moment, particularly in the tech sector, and they've probably gone from an expansion and they've gone back to a stability-based model where they're cutting back on workers to try and gain a bit of control in a uncertain market. So that gives you some ideas about that. The corporate strategy is usually set by the CEO and the C-suite. It may be that a marketing CMO and other financial officer are involved, but it's very important that the corporate strategy is accurate, because a lot of people don't often question it after it's been created, and we'll get onto that in a moment. So 67% of well-formulated strategies failed due to poor execution. And this next slide is one that you may be able to associate with as well. But yeah, 66% of well-formulated strategies. Now, it's an interesting stat, that, because it could be a case that the strategies weren't well formulated. People just think they are, and people don't question the strategy. But it's also a clear indicator that the execution of strategy is difficult in businesses. And I've got some reasons why that might be, but here is an example marketing manager biting a pencil because she's frustrated. And I've seen this happen in businesses where the corporate strategy is set, everyone in the C-suite is happy with it, and then it's often handed off to a CMO or just a marketing manager or a head of marketing, whoever it may be, and they're like, well, can you implement all of this and get all the results, please? And then this person here has had that happen, and they don't know where to start. They don't know if they have the skill set. They don't know if they have enough knowledge in X, Y, and Z. And this is an important one as well. The corporate strategy, by its nature, is broad because it needs to cover the whole business. So that can be a challenge for marketers when they're probably taking on something that's more in the business area of the strategy. So why do strategies fail? Well, the first thing is vague strategic vision. If the strategy isn't clear enough, it is going to be hard to act on that. There can be a culture of fear. People can be scared of doing things wrong. Could be a lack of planning and control. So in terms of, we've decided what we're going to do, but we haven't planned how we're actually going to implement and make sure that we do it. A lack of alignment, and this can happen in small and large companies where people aren't speaking to each other and people don't know what the other one is doing, and therefore they're not working in unity and harmony with each other in terms of what they're doing towards the strategy. They don't have the skill set. Focusing on tactics too early is a very big one, and I mentioned it in the previous webinar. But the problem with focusing on tactics too early is that you often end up focusing on quick wins and all of this sort of stuff. And the problem with that is that quick wins are quick, but they're also often short-lived. So if you're going to just focus on quick wins, you may run into problems where your strategy fails because it just isn't long enough. You haven't done enough. You've got to focus on some short-term things and long-term things to be effective. Finally, there's no implementation plan. Without an implementation plan, it's just going to fall because no one knows what they're doing and when. So ensuring success. So how do we ensure success with strategies? So I showed you the first slide in the corporate strategy element, and we're now in the business strategy. Now, that slide I showed you with the lady biting her pencil in frustration, she's most likely in this area here. She might not be a CMO, she might not be building the corporate strategy, but she is responsible for the marketing and possibly the digital as well. In terms of what comes in the business strategy, this is where you've obviously got objectives for marketing KPIs, but market research, how you find a competitive advantage, and the customers are key to this element of it. And there are more elements in this bit, but I mean, these are ones as a business we focus on, and it's possible that you're in these areas as well. So setting the targets here is very important, and our discovery sort of almost comes in at this level. And I'll go into a bit more detail about that later on. So building the roadmap. It's a quick slide, and we're now in the functional strategy. So the functional strategy is essentially the tactics, and as we've seen with those previous quotes, seems to be the element that people get wrong. And I think part of it is a lack of knowledge, and we've obviously been over the parts, but I think it's quite difficult to link the functional strategy to the business strategy, and I think it's harder still to link functional strategy to corporate strategy. They often feed into each other, but I think that's where the main problem is. And our discovery is essentially building out the functional strategy in terms of what are the actions we need to do to hit the business goals, whether the business goals, we want to increase revenue, we want to increase leads, we want to increase conversions, those types of things, the functional strategy helps hit. And that's what we want to focus on in the roadmap. So functional strategy, having a clear understanding of customers is key. Users, having a focus on users, and we use like design thinking methodology where the user is at the heart of everything, but it makes building functional tactics so much easier, because rather than focusing on, oh, we need to run this ad, or we need to do this, or we need to have a TikTok account, you're actually looking, well, what problems are users having at the moment? How can we fix those problems? What are the quickest ways we can fix those problems, and what are some better things we can do, and then rank them. So you're not just focusing on, oh, we need to do the quickest thing, we need to just run PPC ads. You're really breaking it down much more effectively. And all of those tactics formulate the roadmap, as I mentioned, which will hit the goals. And essentially solving problems is the order of the day here. If you solve problems, you'll do better as a business. The more problems you solve, the better you'll do. It's as simple as that, really. So what's the approach? Well, I shared this slide in the previous webinar that we did. As you can see, whoops. So in the previous webinar, we went through how you can run a workshop. The discovery session that I did previously to this one covers this in a lot more detail, but you can sort of see here how this session goes through the process of finding the problems, finding the solutions. And obviously you can do it in person with sticky notes and whatever as well. So why would you run a workshop? Well, it allows all key stakeholders to be involved, focuses on problems and the solutions. It breaks down big problems into more manageable, fixable things through tactics. And this is a key one. It's the example I would give is that a lot of companies come to us and say, oh yeah, our conversion rate isn't very good, or we want more leads. Now, to both of those questions, there's probably 100 answers, possible answers, in terms of what's causing those problems. By running a workshop and having the discovery sprint, as I spoke about in the previous webinar, we can really dig down into what are the main problems, and by solving them, you'll solve the conversion problem, you'll solve the leads problem automatically, basically. So that breaking down big problems is a key thing there. And as I mentioned a couple of times, our previous webinar covers it in more detail. So a demonstration. So what I'm going to do here is share the roadmap for Distinction, for FinTech Limited. It's not our roadmap, it's FinTech Limited. And if you look back at think back to the discovery webinar, you can see how the two areas we were looking at were based on the website and the marketing, and you can see how all of those items that have come up have been put into the roadmap. If you do go back to that slide, you can sort of see these were the quick wins. So the quick wins are right near the start in January, and then the more complex things are moving later on in the year. And another interesting thing with this as well is that, for example, one of the issues in the discovery was an issue with the checkout. And you can see that some of the checkout issues are over here in terms of the new checkout system. But we've also got some quick wins. So if the quick wins don't fix it, we know that we need to do more, and we've already got that planned in. If those checkout updates fix all the problems, then obviously we can move more stuff in over here. So it does really give you a lot of flexibility in terms of, so that's the new checkout system there. The other thing I'll mention here is that in each task, we've summarized what needs to be done and have an outcome. So have a plan to update checkout. So the main thing from this plan would be, what can we get rid of in terms of stages? Where are the drop-offs? And this has already been looked at in the discovery sprint. So there'll be a lot of information that they can draw back to and make those decisions. This one is marked as to do because someone needs to do this task. Obviously, you can assign tasks, you can add tags, and you can change the status. So once it's done, it's done. And this allows you to revisit the roadmap and just make sure that things are being done. I think some of the time, I think when it comes back to the implementation of strategy, is people are great at talking about doing things, but when it actually comes to the doing of things, that's where things probably fall down a little bit. But having this here, making people accountable, is the key. And you can see we've split it between website and marketing. This is purely designed for FinTech Limited. If you're a big company, you might just have a website one, and that's managed by the head of engineering or a developer. And the marketing one is managed just by marketing. And then they work together collaboratively on the discovery to come up with those solutions. There's loads of the whole point of the roadmap is it's flexible to your problems, your solutions, and your business. So this is just an example of how it could look. The other thing I'll mention here, because this is how we sort of present it to our clients, but we mention their goals here, so we're always on target with them, and we revisit this with them every month. They can come in here and add a note if there's something they want to discuss, or they're not happy with something, or they are happy with something, which can also happen as well. So yeah, that's sort of how we lay that out in terms of that. So you can see here everything that came up in the discovery is in here now, and it's in order of how we ranked it by priority. So that's sort of how you build it. We've also got a backlog here, and things can be added from here just into the backlog if something needs to be done, but we're not quite sure where it could go. So yeah, there's potential for this to merge and change. You can also notice as well that as things get later on in the year, things get a bit thinner. That's why you revisit the roadmap a few months before that, just to make sure that it's always filled out And hopefully all of these things will be done by then. If they're not, then it's a case of moving things along. But it's essentially just to give accountability and make sure that people are doing what was agreed. So that's the roadmap example. So back to the presentation. So a key importance is documenting the roadmap. Roadmaps are only useful if they're documented and visited regularly, as I mentioned, and there's an ownership of tasks. Another important thing, as I brought up before with the design thinking, is users dictate tactics and don't just keep adding things onto the roadmap. If you get into the point where the backlog is quite big, then it may be a case you may need more discovery, or you need to rethink like the roadmap sessions themselves. So that's something to really think about. Don't just keep adding. Well, we've made a roadmap, let's just add everything in constantly. It's probably not going to work, because the other element of it as well, you need to make sure that people are able to do the work and have time to do the work. So it's a little bit of management in terms of time as well. We document our roadmaps in Miro, but other tools are available. We're not sponsored or affiliated with them. We just like the tool, and a lot of our clients like it as well. So the roadmap checklist. So to ensure success with your roadmap, your tactics need to feed directly into your goals. They need to focus on users and fix problems affecting those users. The roadmap tasks all have owners who are accountable and have deadlines for their completion. You have scheduled time box meeting every month to revisit the roadmap and ask questions and really make sure that things are on track. If you still feel you lack the skills to implement a roadmap, you may need to look into hiring internally or seeking external support like an agency to help you out with it. So the recap. So we provided a brief breakdown of strategy on the corporate, business and functional level. We've also looked at some of the problems marketers specifically face when implementing strategy and why that can be difficult. We've explained how workshops can define and solve those problems. We've also given the roadmap layout example and gone through that and how tasks can be labeled. The thing I'll say with that, like there's lots of tools like Trello and Forecast and stuff that do a similar job, so you can do it through there as well. And finally, we've gone through the roadmap checklist to help ensure your roadmap is successful. So what are the next steps? So you know how a digital roadmap will help you solve the business problems identified during discovery. If you missed the discovery webinar, you'll be able to find a link on this landing page, and you should hopefully know how to create a roadmap that sets you up for success. And the other thing I hope is that in terms of how these link together, the identifying of problems, coming up with solutions, ranking solutions, and putting them into a roadmap is the best way to get the long-term results. And that would be the main takeaway from me in terms of that. But if you'd like any help running a digital roadmap session or a discovery session, then drop us a line. Our email is hello@distinction.co.uk, as you can see on the slide. I'd like to thank you for sticking out until the end, and thank you for your time. And hopefully I'll speak to you again soon, and best of luck with your roadmaps and discoveries. Take care. Bye.